Into your book because I'm very interested for you to tell the story of why you felt compelled to write this particular book. And I find this subject matter to be very interesting because it's what I do.
Well, it's not something intentional. It's kind of something that evolved. You know, I start with the Simpson trial, and first I'm a detective, and I'm dealing with the press before O.J. Simpson by not even returning their phone calls.
Right.
There's nothing that they can help me with. Then the O.J. Simpson case, and the world descended on Los Angeles Police Department and our division. I was the darling, then I was the evil sorcerer. Then I was stalked, bothered by the media. I wrote a book. Then it starts coming around. Then I write another book in the Martha Moxley, and now the media is saying, oh, well, okay, now we're going to be on his side on the Martha Moxley case. And then I work for Fox. And really, when I started working for Fox, Bill Shine, Roger Ailes, they saw that they need somebody like myself and Dr. Baden to be here to help them not only understand, but do no harm in criminal cases and have some kind of a connection and allegiance with the police and be responsible enough to pass on information, sit on information that's important. And Dr. Baden and I understand what's important. We also know what the police are doing. So I don't understand why other networks, there's thousands of detectives and pathologists that are retired that would love to be on retainer or work part-time or work for a network.
But we already got the best too. It's just...
So, well, you know what?
We're smart.
And I'm going to ask Dr. Baden this question at the same time.
We're smart.
Very smart.
We kind of triage information. We know what to put out and what not to. We sit on information, and Fox is still on top on these criminal investigations.
Totally.
So you can do it.
That's right.
You can do it. And that's what stimulated this book, because I watch other networks pay for the news. They don't check with the police department before they have witnesses or potential witnesses or even suspects being flown to New York, given money, compromising everything in the case, kind of like a surveillance or a wiretap, where we need them in their house to actually get the phone call to make a incriminating statement in the case.
So you almost are like fact checkers. You go over the information and you look for new information and analyze the patterns.
Well, we actually go in the field and we actually investigate from the information, but we don't have this, I think, structured system.
Exactly.
But we make contact with the investigators and we pass on information. And we don't put it out on the media if it's...
Well, you get information. I mean, you've been out. Both of you are part of Greta's team as well, and Greta does a phenomenal job on her show, breaking news all the time, like number one and all the crime stuff. So, I mean, I've seen you out in the field. You've been part of, investigations essentially, right? I mean, you've been able to get information in the field that other people don't have, and you pass it on if you have it. How does it work?
Well, let's talk about when Dr. Baden and I were involved in the Drew Peterson case. Dr. Baden and I talked on the phone, and we were talking about the Savio case. I talked to Dr. Baden to get information to confront the coroner, so I had a working knowledge in agreement with Dr. Baden that her death was in fact a homicide. And we both looked at
it from our own different specialties.
And what were the things, the patterns?
And there wouldn't have been justice in that case, Catherine, because that was a case where they had just left the woman.
Right?
Yeah, and then because of what they did, then the case is now open, and he's going to go down on it.
And I want Dr. Baden to explain what he saw, but that's his specialty. I know what I saw, but I was so proud of him because he went right on against everybody in the country and just said, this is a homicide, absolutely, 100%. I don't even need to look at the body.
And part of it is Mark knows from his police sources, his police investigation, he concluded that the investigation of that death was flawed in many ways. I, by looking at the autopsy findings and going over the autopsy, saw that the autopsy was flawed, calling it an accidental drowning when the evidence initially showed that she had drowned in the bathtub at her home with multiple lacerations and injuries on the body, which doesn't happen in an accidental drowning.
She was in a fight.
So, right. From my perspective, she was in a fight. Mark was able to find out that there was a lot of problems with the way the coroner's jury did things, and how they arrived at conclusions, and how there was a police officer on the coroner's jury that could have been a factor in calling it an accident.
And you guys were able to get to the bottom of the family structure, what was going on in the relationship between the two of them, the prior domestic violence between them, the threats, there were letters, all of that stuff that you uncovered. I remember watching you on television about it.
Neil Shorey, a brave young man who had to balance his vows, his profession, and a dead victim that has not been found yet. So it was a balancing act, and being able to talk to him and treat him with the respect due his profession and his obligation to somebody that trusted him with information to make sure that it was passed on if she was not found or found dead.
And that was Stacy, the fourth wife, and she.
And what happens? Mark is trained in how to interrogate witnesses, how to find witnesses, interrogate them, get information that can be helpful. I was able to help out because the family then wanted a second autopsy, and the second autopsy, which we did was prove that this was a homicide.
Third wife, Kathleen.
He did more than help out.
Yes.
But, I mean, he stood against the entire forensic community and stood there and made a statement that they actually had to conclude the same thing.
That's right. But what's interesting, talking about the entire forensic community, the solve rate for murders in this country, which when I started out was like 85% murders solved in the 60s. Presently, with all the DNA and all the new technology, has dropped to less than 45%.
And what's your opinion why? Because
part of it is that the new investigations rely too much on the forensic laboratory and not enough about the old-fashioned way that Mark was brought up, shoe leather, knocking on doors, checking alibis.
And interrogation skills.
And interrogating the first 48 hours.
Absolutely.
And also, what about the context of the lives of the people that are no longer there, the murdered victims? There is something that was created before and something created around that murder victim that may have caused this whole thing to happen.
That's right.
Which is just straight psychology,
straight
patterns.
Right, but I always called it, you have to do a psychological autopsy on the environment the victim lived in and who the victim was to actually understand the movements and what happened after or in the absence of the victim.
That's a great term.
But everybody forgets in the entertainment industry that there's a victim. They start talking about ratings, getting the next person on TV and everything. And
exclusives.
And it's not because we work for Fox. If I wasn't working for Fox and somebody else was doing what I do, I would say the same thing. Fox has taken a step beyond everybody else and being resposable, and they're still on top of it.
Right.
So
you can do it that way. The proof is in the pudding, as they say. So also I want to tell people where they can get this. Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble.
Barnes &
Is
Noble.
it on Kindle?
All the bookstores.
Oh, I got to take a break. Okay, and on that note, we're going to take a quick break for a message from our sponsors, and we'll be right back with Dr. Michael Baden, Mark Fuhrman, and Catherine Smerling. Welcome back. So we're just talking about what we thought we'd like to discuss next with our esteemed panel. And you brought up, Dr. Smerling, that you want to talk about Casey Anthony and the investigation that's been ongoing with Kaylee Anthony. Obviously, that's something that all four of us are very familiar with that case. And what were your thoughts?
Well, the fact is that it's really touched my heart because I work with families and I work with generational families and looking at patterns and structure. And the fact that she could possibly or allegedly killed her child and then went on with her life indicates to me